Here we go. Hello, Sarah. How are you doing?
Hi, Guy. Very well, thank you. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you very much for joining us on Blue Earth podcast today. I'm really looking forward to doing a deep dive into AimHi and everything you want to achieve with that. But before we get into the juicy bit, I would love it if you could just introduce yourself and your career leading up until AimHi,
From the very beginning.
as far back as you like to go.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sarah Humphreys. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders at AimHi Earth, and we do sustainability training and engagement for enterprise businesses. And I suppose as far back as is relevant is my background really is in environmental anthropology. So I've
Okay,
always
nice.
been really interested in that
Yeah,
intersection between people and the environment and the planet, and how do people think and talk about their natural environment? How do they interact with it? How do they take responsibility for it? And how do those social norms of behavior change cross
yeah,
culturally? So my master's degree was really looking at taboo and customary institutions that shape people's behavior. But after I finished my master's, I was really feeling a lot of frustration, basically, about the way that experts talk about something as important as the climate and nature crisis,
yeah,
because it just doesn't work at getting people to really care or to take action. Definitely not at the sort of scale and speed that we need it to. And then I received a WhatsApp message from a stranger who is now my co-founder, Matthew Shribman,
very nice.
about his plan to create training all about climate and nature and how to make a difference, but that turned that way of communicating on its head. So it was just literally such a good coincidence that that frustration that I was feeling about current forms of communication and this
Yeah,
opportunity to get involved happened at the same time back in must have been early 2021. And so
fantastic.
along, yeah. So
Was
we have
that
a
while you were coming out of university, having done your masters,
I'd
and you
finished
had
my
this
master.
idea of,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, I'm speaking over you, but I finished my master's almost a year prior, and I'd been doing some work in project management, especially with educational events and tours. So I had a lot of that kind of practical experience of making things happen. But it was when Matthew and our other co-founder Bella, the three of us came together, we really connected over that frustration. And especially in big enterprise businesses, I know, we all know 70%, around 70% of the biggest businesses have sustainability goals or targets in place. So it's not that the strategy isn't there, but they generally fall short because it's a people problem. People lack that knowledge, the skills, the accountability to actually kind of carry them out. Um, and so here we are, sort of 4 years later, trying to shift that number, and working together to scale AimHi Earth to build and deliver immersive online training experiences that try to solve that problem.
okay. So I'm fascinated by kind of
Yeah.
your route into there, and
Yeah.
having studied at university, doing a master's, looking at the kind of human relationship with the
Mm,
planet and environment. That kind of hits one of our pillars pretty hard within Blue Earth. We're
mm,
huge believers. We've probably got a slightly different take on it than you might, but actually it'd be interesting to test it on someone that's done a load of studies on this. But we're big believers that the type of person that wants to get outdoors, live healthily, tends to be wants to be more sustainable, because those sorts of people want to, when they're not at work, they want to go running, swimming, cycling up mountains, in the ocean. They just want to be outdoors, and as a result, they have a healthier connection to the planet. And
mm,
sustainability, in our mind, for those sort of people, is closer to being second nature, because they've got their piece of the planet, they've got their playground that they want to protect. So that's where we always draw a lot of inspiration on that kind of outdoors and adventure side of content. And actually, we think it's far more interesting to connect people over their passions, and then, of course, use business as the driving tool in order to change things. And the people in businesses is so key. But is that something you've ever kind of gone in on? We've done it off an assumption and our own experiences, and then we found a lot of other people. We started talking about the blue thread, or the common thread that ran between these entrepreneurs that were building such amazing impact brands or big companies like I don't know, the founder of Iceland supermarket, Richard Walker. If he's not running a supermarket and trying to be the green grocer, he's literally climbing Everest or surfing.
Mm.
um, and you start picking up all these little threads that we started. There was a common thread, a correlation there. So I just wondered whether or not that's kind of fed into, because that the power of people is so important.
And I'm trying to, I'll misremember this quote, but I often think about that, we protect what we love. That
Mm,
there is such a real kind of, it's really true, that I think it is true. And I actually think that in a way, so our training is about sustainability, ESG, climate change, risk, but nature really is the best way to connect people really tangibly to that issue. I think because we all, if I don't think very few of us don't have fond emotions when it comes to thinking about nature. And I
yeah.
actually think, especially, and maybe we'll talk about this more, but especially a lot of learning is kind of forgets that emotion really matters
Mm,
in whether people kind of change how they're thinking. In order to change how someone thinks, you have to kind of change how they feel. And so using nature, it's kind of a Trojan horse of nature in many ways, helping
yeah.
people connect, see that bigger picture, and understand their role. And so it's interesting. At the beginning, in our first year of working together, we really focused on how do we perfect this experience of training people and changing their mindsets and behaviors at scale.
Yeah.
So we really worked that first year on just trying to train as many people as we can and get that product, get that training experience perfected. In our first year, I think we trained over 150,000 people in that
Wow.
first year, just working kind of B2C, seeing what the appetite is,
Yeah.
iterating what works, what achieves the outcomes that we're hoping for, how do we get people's attention and keep it. But what we were finding in that first year is that we trained loads of people all around the world, but we kind of really returned to our impact story, really, or our impact theory, and started thinking, how do we reach outside the echo chamber to those people that don't have that same passion or connection to the rest of nature? How do we access those people who have the potential to be really powerful levers for change? And that's where the focus on employees at organizations came from.
Right.
For those
Okay.
people who it isn't as obvious as it is for you and me, who perhaps don't care about surfing or hiking in nature, or who care
Mm,
about have other different priorities. In a way, it's anthropology again. How do you translate this global issue into local terms that resonates with a particular audience? And for many, it's about using nature as brilliant examples to illustrate what we're talking about. But for
yeah.
others, that isn't the best way. And so it's a really interesting process of kind of culturally adapting what we're doing depending on who we're working with.
Yeah, it is. I mean, humans are we're funny. We're funny old beasts.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I was chatting to my brother the other day, who I run Blue Earth with as
yeah,
one of my co-founders, and the example of a cigarette. Like, there's thousands, if not millions, of people that still smoke, but they literally know it's killing them,
yeah,
um, but they still do it. And it's that kind of psyche but they like it, so they do it. And
yeah,
when you start bringing that into kind of a comparison into climate, we know there is major issues with what humans are doing to the planet, but are we willing to act on it? Are we willing to change how we act? But I think what we come down to is we need to change. We need systemic change, so that actually
mm,
it becomes easy for humans who are never going to change really on wanting more things and better things. And
yeah.
there's always got to be human progression. So we've got to create systems that enable that, which probably makes what you're doing, going into that enterprise level, makes so much more sense, because you can kind of, yeah, you can change the system there
Mm.
that then filters back down to the
But the
consumer or
the
the person.
behavioral psychology of it is so interesting, isn't it? Because you're
Mm,
right, it isn't just about giving people the facts of this leads to the
yeah,
chances of you dying are this, or whatever it might be.
yeah,
It's got to be informed by behavioral psychology training. So I often talk about AimHi Earth's training as a blend of climate science, behavioral psychology, and showbiz.
Right. Okay.
Because how you tell the story is as important, what you're telling the science has to
Yeah.
be told in a way that activates them to care. But also, we're living in an age where we have so much information, more information
Yeah.
that it's impossible, it's impossible to comprehend how
Yeah.
much
Yeah. Yeah.
information there is at our fingertips. And so how do you also get people's attention in the first place and get them to listen to the way that you're telling the story and
Yeah.
then understand how that relates to them in their context?
Definitely.
It's so interesting. I find it so
Yeah.
interesting.
And before we go deep diving into aim high
Oh
and kind
yeah.
of the sort of the nuts and bolts that makes it so brilliant, just touching on that story. So Matthew sent you a message saying, let's start something, and then Bella's come into the equation. How did you all come together? And have you all got slightly different backgrounds?
Mm. It's I feel sometimes like one of the luckiest people ever, actually, because I had never met them before this.
Okay.
Matthew, his background he's a science communicator. He's got
Right.
millions and millions of views on YouTube, really has perfected that way of communicating these stories and has a long background in education and tutoring. So he's kind of the Imagineer behind what we do. Meanwhile, Bella has a decade in tech, has worked in multiple startups before now, has raised before, has been on that journey before, and her brain is so inspiring every day because she's constantly thinking about how to optimize, how to bring something to life visually, how to create those systems internally that mean that we can scale beyond just the three of us.
Yeah.
And then since then, actually, we've grown our team even more to add even, you start to notice as you grow what gaps there are, and also how I once heard advice that if your company can't operate without you, then it isn't a good company. And we really took that to heart. And so have really thought about, is it the case that Sarah needs to be in every single sales call? And is that a good way? Is that good? I
Yeah.
like being in sales call because I'm hungry to hear from the people that we're hoping to work with. But it isn't a sustainable company if I have to be there in every single one. So since then we've added Jack into our team, who's got a long experience in enterprise sales. We've got a new operations lead who's been with us about a year, Dave. Game changer. It's fun. The team is everything, isn't it?
Mm.
He's scaled companies before from, I think he was employee 3 and he left at employee 103. So as we go
Right.
on that journey of building our team, we know we're in good hands. We've got Riley, who's joined our team as our head of product. And again, they are amazing. Really think about the process that helps us continue to scale what we're doing. So it began as sort of 3 strangers with a shared
Yeah. And
frustration.
how did
Yeah.
that come? How did you all know you were thinking the same and on the
So
same sort of wavelength?
I think Matthew was talking about his plan to solve this problem,
Right.
and had spoken to a number of people asking if they knew of anyone with kind of project management experience or events management experience, or
Right.
who might be a good fit. And a friend of a friend gave him my WhatsApp number. So it
Nice.
really ran. I wish there were a kind of
No, it's good.
easier
It's good. I
answer to
like
that.
all sorts of random. You've got people that have grown up together.
Yeah,
I'm
your
related
brother.
to my co-founder, and then you've got other people that have kind of gone out and found them on matchmaking services and used Y Combinator and all these weird and wonderful ways. But there's a story behind everyone. But that's great. You've all come in with your own. You've got
Mm,
your project management and events. Matthew, sorry, fully understands content, and then you've got the tech side of Bella, and that's just
mm,
having three co-founders that can kind of have their own lane and lead the charge in their own part, and then you back yourself up with a load of experience is super smart. So let's get really into the nuts and bolts of Aim High. I think you've really painted a nice picture of effectively the problem that you're solving is that kind of engagement and understanding of the problem and how we can solve it and how you can use businesses as a force for good and actually have some fun doing it rather than kind of getting in the doom and gloom is kind of where I think you're kind of leaning to on that showbiz side of things. But if you could just give us a kind of really simple overview of what AimHi is and kind of, what products and services you're offering. Just start painting a picture of the business itself. That'd be really helpful.
Great. I will. So AimHi Earth is a kind of climate ed tech company that builds and delivers tech-enabled, immersive online training experiences that upskill and transform complex global workforces, enabling them to mitigate climate risks and accelerate positive action.
Very cool. Very cool. That's good. It's so very, very kind of neatly explained, because it's often quite hard to get. I know it sounds like there's all sorts of different parts. Well, I struggle with it loads with Blue Earth. We're doing events. We're building an ecosystem for ventures companies. We're raising money. We're connecting people. That was really, really succinct, and it is harder than people think when you're trying to get that down. So, and just to dig into that, let's just dig into some sort of, can you kind of give me a bit of a case study of a few clients that you kind of work for? Because I feel like that kind of then paints a picture of exactly how people can kind of engage with AimHi.
So yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of use cases that a client might come to us because they're particularly worried about green. They might have a leadership team who care deeply on a personal level, but want to know how to apply this in their work and how to embed this across their organization, for example.
Yeah.
We've been working with PepsiCo for the last 3 years on a climate champions program that essentially seeks to upskill their workforce to support their PepsiCo positive transformation strategy, which is their kind of global sustainability agenda. And so we've been working with them. I think we're 3 years in. We've delivered training in 20 countries and 6 different languages with them. And the idea is basically to give these individuals in their company that holistic understanding of the key climate sustainability concepts, and explain, what is this. You could be working in finance at PepsiCo and think, what's this got to do with me? Why are we talking about regenerative agriculture? What's that got to do with me? And so it's harder to connect to their sustainability strategy. We help join those dots with them. So over the course of 4 or 5 online time efficient sessions, we quickly take their learners on that journey, communicating about those concepts in a really interactive way. It's kind of like an extremely interactive television show that you're on with hundreds or thousands of colleagues. So it really has human emotion, energy, and community at its heart. Because I think one of the problems we really want to solve is that sustainability quite often becomes something quite siloed in big organizations. I don't know if you've found that in some of the companies that you
Definitely,
talk
yeah.
to.
There's like a sustainability, the CSO sits over there. And who do they report to? Is it the CFO, the CMO, the CEO? They always get a bit lost, and then they kind of end on.
And they
They
have
feel
no
lonely.
one, and they feel lonely, and they feel like they're a team of 1 or at best case 5, and
Yeah,
every email with sustainability in the subject line is just forwarded to them. That can't be how this problem is solved. And actually, I have noticed a bit of a shift in the way that businesses are talking about sustainability. In fact, I've noticed that. I don't, again, would
definitely.
love to hear what you think, but
Yeah.
they're
I think there's a bit of being
yeah,
blended in. I think there's a bit of a language change on kind of
I've
how
noticed
things
that.
are, how things are positioned. I think the way that
Yeah,
Trump blew
there's that.
everything up at the start of the year, that in if you I'm an eternal optimist. I think there's a positive stance to take on that. It's shaken the tree, and it's forced people to kind of think properly about the business case for everything.
I couldn't agree
And there
more.
is always a business case for everything, and the results are going to be the same. But if you can explain why a business should do it without having to explain the sustainability credentials, it's more likely to cut through. And then there's a secondary that, oh, by the way, it's better for the planet. But often, I
Totally.
think the shift over the last 5 years is, it's
Yeah,
sustainable, and it's come the wrong way around.
I've
So
totally
yeah,
seen this. I've really seen the same thing, Guy. I think it seems as though people are maybe they're talking about it in different terms. So they're talking about it in terms of risk mitigation, resilience, efficiency drives. And so actually, it's never been more relevant to make sure that everybody's on the same page about what this means and what this looks like.
yeah,
And so that's where we come in. We're being brought in to really rapidly get everybody on the same page, give them that foundation, that grounding in those key concepts and how they interlink, and then equipping them to ask good questions, to make good decisions at every stage of, throughout their job, and so be an extended part of the sustainability team regardless of their role. And so that's essentially what we're doing with PepsiCo, and it's great. It's been such an interesting experience, again, of that translation of how do you efficiently translate these topics into the PepsiCo
Yeah.
language. But again, that's the joy, because we deliver our training live. It's online, so it's very convenient, easy to integrate. We can have hundreds or thousands of attendees, but because it's delivered live, it's impossible for it to be out of date, or we're not doing our job properly.
Yeah.
I did an online training course relatively recently that was, it was talking about something that had happened 2 years prior, so it didn't feel current, and so I kind of lost my trust, and so then it lost my interest, and then you find yourself replying to emails at the same time as doing your training, and that's not what we want. That's not how
Yeah.
you achieve change. So we can refer to things that are happening globally, or changes that are happening internally live as it's happening, which is a really great position to be in.
Do you have to work with the client quite closely? Would you break it down in the sort of the context of, right, we need to understand what the ambition is and the mission of the sustainability agenda and the efficiencies of the business. We then need to put together a program that's going to help educate everyone, which is likely quite bespoke to the mission. And then I imagine there's quite a lot in kind of following up, because there's one thing listening, there's another thing doing. So actually then kind of checking back in on the accountability of who said what and how things are going to happen. Is it a case by case, client by client basis that you're kind of working on?
The accountability part I'm very interested in. Oh, and again, we're back to the kind of behavioral psychology can of worms that
Yeah.
um I'll try not to go off on too much of a tangent about that. But as I say, Matthew is also a scientist in his background. I'm a social scientist by training, so we've always been really interested in the data of, like, it's
Mm.
all very well us saying this is corporate sustainability training of the future, but how can we prove, what do we have to show for that? How can we
Mm.
prove that that's the case? How do we measure the impact we're having? And since our inception, that impact measurement has really been at the core. It's really been something we've prioritized since the beginning. All of our or anyone we train would do a short pre-training survey to understand that baseline.
Yeah.
What are the preconceptions they're coming in with? What are we working with? Immediately after, we would, of course, give them another survey, and they would report changes in how motivated they're feeling, changes in their confidence communicating, or whatever it might be. And then again, a month down the line, there is another survey for the trainees, our impact survey, to say, okay, we were imagining that you'd be pumped immediately after our training to make some changes, but did it
Yeah.
stick? Because if it
Yeah.
didn't, is it impact? And it's great because we're able to say with confidence, look, over 90% of trainees report tangibly changing their behavior after our training. And then, so we know that formula for impact. And if we see that dropping, we know that we need to go back to the way that we're training people about these topics. And it's fun with corporate clients, actually, because we can work with them to make sure that the indicators of impact are what they're looking for as well. So we've got our
Yeah.
impact measurement, but we also can work on, what does success look like for you, PepsiCo, or
Yeah.
whomever, And then in terms of the tailoring, at the beginning, it is true that it was quite a high touch process. We were very hands-on, making sure that we really understand what are the outcomes, what's important to you, what is your context. But the joy in working over a long term with a client, which is mainly what we do now, a year or 2 years, or multiple years working with the same client, is that we start to really develop that shared language together, and we get that we're kind of embedded in their company. And so we become kind of stickier the longer that we work with an enterprise. So at the beginning, working with PepsiCo, we did work really hard to make sure that we were tackling what they needed to tackle, making sure that it was really relevant to a company in the food and beverage industry, making sure that we understood the audience and so could translate it culturally to land. And now that's ready to just be slightly tweaked depending on which country we're speaking to or which function we're talking to. And I actually, one of the reasons that we're raising at the moment is to further scale that process. How can
Right.
we turn that high, initially quite high touch process into something really easy to do for when
Yeah.
we have, for when we have 20, 30, 40, 100 enterprise clients at once.
Yeah, and you do on your website. I saw that you've kind of PepsiCo is one of seemingly hundreds of brands that you work with. I saw, I don't know, ones that jumped out were like Sky, Unilever,
Mm,
Riverford. There seems to be quite a good showing on the kind of FMCG side of things, and then
yeah,
obviously some more in the media space and so on. Are you kind of specializing in sectors, or how did that come to be?
that wasn't. I wish I was going to say that that was really on purpose.
Yeah,
But a lot of that was at the beginning, it was very much responding to inbound requests. I think that the FMCG sector is really open to this because the supply chain and the sustainability quite obviously impacts the future of their business and the resilience of their business. If harvests fail, then that impacts their bottom line. In
yeah,
a way that's much more tangible than, say, you would think someone like Sky. However, we worked with Sky because they have, you probably know, they have a really impressive graduate scheme where they are constantly having new starters. And we worked with them on a project for their graduates. That wasn't a long-term partnership, but it was a really exciting. And we got some
yeah.
special guests. We got some of their talent involved in delivering the training. So people
Oh,
from
brilliant.
TV, and it was really looking at communication. And since then, we've also worked with others in the TV and film industry, like Paramount, BAFTA, CNBC, etc., to think about if you have content, to how can you have content that talks about climate change, which is front of mind for so many of your audience,
Yeah,
without how can you create that content if you don't have that foundational understanding of what is what is climate change, what do they mean? And I really I think there's no expectation for anyone to know all of the answers, but having those rules of thumb, ways of thinking about these topics is really what we hope to, that's kind of number one, what we hope to achieve, helping people with those skills to ask good questions rather than have all of the answers to every single question.
okay. And then just to kind of, because the educating the employees to kind of make the right decisions within the business from a kind of climate and sustainability standpoint makes total sense. I love the graduate thing as well. But
Mm,
people, they're willing to learn and absorb and understand. And if you can plant the right seeds at the early stage of their career, I think that's brilliant. But try ideally in an actionable mindset, because we know that next generation coming through do care. And in fact, there's probably more of a challenge educating the people at the top that are in their kind of bit more old school systems and thinking. But I think we could probably lose ourselves if we go down too many red herrings and kind of talk about the difference there. But what I am interested to understand is the business model. How does AimHi operate as a business? Where do your revenues come from?
So we charge enterprise clients mainly at the moment on a cohort to cohort. We generally charge them per cohort, but we tend to
Mm,
bundle those up. So it might be that they work with us for a year and we deliver 5 cohorts in 3 languages and take them on that learning program. What we're doing more and more is, initially we really focused on, okay, how do we scale what we're doing horizontally across a company? So how do we train every single employee across geographies or different business units? And that still is something that is front and center for us. As they get new starters, how can we be embedded on their onboarding? As we, how do we make sure that people across a complex global company, how can we make sure that they understand everything that they need to and are empowered to incorporate that into their work? However, beyond that horizontal scaling, we've also started developing more kind of vertical streams of work or propositions that we sell into to enterprise clients that we work with. So that is about, you've got a learner who's part of a cohort, they go through the learning program. That aim is for that not to be the last time that we work with that learner. So how do
yeah,
we re-engage them on an ongoing basis, annually, for example, refreshers, or what are the more in-depth skills that they might need to develop, and how can we ensure that we're anticipating regulatory changes or compliance introductions. And so we're thinking about it on those two kind of axes. How do we make sure that at scale an entire workforce is upskilled and empowered, but also how can we make sure that we are building on the foundation that we've established with that initial intervention? So looking at skills-based, for example, communications training, or training more specifically about legislation or risk or whatever it might be. And because we're still quite a small, nimble team, we're able to be quite reactive. So
Yeah.
there are things that are on our roadmap already, but if a large client came to us and said, listen, we really need to dive into this, it's something that we can quite quickly spin up, which is a really great position to be in.
And so that on that case, you kind of dig in, research it, make sure you're up to date with the latest legislations, for example, and then you can kind of build out a bit of a program of how you can kind of feed that in. One question I've got is around language. When you say we drop it into 5, you say that very casually. We just drop it into 5 different languages, but I'm sure there's just break that down on what that looks like functionally as a business.
Yeah, because it's more than just subtitles. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. I great question. One of the things, as I've mentioned, that kind of really sets us apart is that live, interactive delivery. And so when we were tasked with translating our training for a Turkish business unit, it isn't enough to simply, put closed captions on a screen. And so, in fact, we have a pretty decent cohort of really inspiring presenters in, I think right now, 8 different languages. And we have linguistically translated and culturally adapted our training to really resonate with those audiences. But they still deliver it in that same AimHi Earth style. As we scale, I think we've got our eye on a number of ways that we can make that process much more efficient. It's not, to be fair, it's not too. We've done it enough times that we've got our process down to this. But there's always room for improvement, and there's always room to make the way that we do things more efficient. And so we've got our eye on how we can productize that even further. And that's another reason why we're raising at the moment, sort of thinking, how can we use this tech to make sure that when we have 100 enterprise clients, how can we make sure that we are responding really quickly to meet the demand?
Okay. And that reference, obviously, sounds like very ambitious. You've got a very clear kind of product, and it's got a good fit within the market, and you're scaling, which obviously you're raising on, and we'll get into that. But just to give us a bit of a context of kind of what scale are you at now, and then where do you think you can kind of be in the next 3 to 5 years? What's the size of the opportunity that you're seeing?
We've managed to double our revenue 3 years running.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. We have in our near-term pipeline a significant near-term pipeline with large enterprise clients. We're aiming big, honestly, Guy, because we really see the need for this, and we're seeing real demand from the market. At the moment, we've got 3 enterprise clients that we're working with, but I think we were looking at the total addressable market the other day, and you start to think, when we're working with 105,000 enterprise clients, what will that, you start to sort of really imagine an amazing future. But I think in our near-term pipeline, we're looking at 2.5 million ARR due in our pipeline in live proposals now, and we're hoping to do the traditional triple, double story.
And are you finding that, once you going towards that classic kind of hockey stick thing where there's quite a lot of foundational work that goes into kind of getting the product right? And then once you start winning a few clients, the power of word of mouth is pretty good. You can lean on the kind of the credibility that, you rattle off some of the names that you're working with. It often makes the sell a huge amount easier once you've got some big enterprises working with you.
We were thinking a lot like Airbnb did it, where they really focused on getting that experience right first, and then turning it into a tech offer. And I think that that's really that's how I hope our journey will be, because we're
Yeah.
quite, as I say, the first couple of years we've been very hands-on, making sure that the training is really fit for purpose, is wowing trainees, getting them coming back for more, getting them to refer us to others. And then now, as we're kind of on that threshold where we now what we need to be turning our attention to is how do we scale this to hit that scale? How do
Yeah.
we now turn this thing into a high leverage platform that is able to contend with really the demand that we're seeing? I actually think the Airbnb comparison I find quite inspiring, because they really began by focusing on, okay, it's a human experience, but how do we make that really scalable?
Okay. Well, it's always nice to draw comparisons, especially when I love it when you can draw comparisons from businesses that are wildly different, totally different sector, but little bits in their model. You're like, that's the same as us because. Okay. And funding's obviously a big part of it. How have you been sort of funded to date? And then what are you out there trying to raise at the moment?
So we did a pre-seed round, maybe it was 2 years ago, about 2 years ago, with some really value aligned, PAT focused, high net worth individuals, angels, family offices, and they've been really fantastic to work with. Now we're onto it's kind of a late seed round. We're raising £1.2 million EIS, and we're now looking who else value aligned would we want to join our cap table. We're pretty close with our previous investors, so it's nice, and it's the majority of whom are committed to following on this round as well, which is great. But we're now sort of thinking, okay, who do we want to join? What further expertise can we draw upon as we do that journey from this quite high touch, quite bespoke working relationship towards some of the plans we have to make that fit for scale.
What does the perfect investor look like? If you could draw them in a picture based on kind of the investment you want them to make and kind of what they would be bringing to the party.
Oh, that's a really good question. I haven't really thought about it in that way. I think really somebody who really buys into the why as well as the how, because both are important. We really are purpose driven as a team. And so people who really buy into that behavioural change, the need, the power of big businesses to instigate that ripple effect of impact across the system that we're working in.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that value aligned is pretty key, because then they totally get what you're trying to do. It does sound as though you've got the benefit of both that commercial opportunity and the impact in equal measure. So you can lead with either. But I think the majority of certainly the investors in our network are looking. There's no doubt they want to make a return on their investment. That's why they are investors. And I think more and more that ability to kind of make a return and have a positive impact is such a good thing. And you're sitting in that sweet spot, and it feels as though someone that kind of understands the problem. I expect there's kind of some high net worth angels that have kind of experienced the pain inside large enterprise, that they can kind of talk about the experiences that they've had and bring that to the table and support. Or it's VCs that are working directly with bigger corporations, or working with their startups and aligning them and taking them in there, or maybe even a corporate venture arm. I think you can dress this up in lots of different ways, which is exciting. So how you get? So you got a bit of follow on from your current investors. 1.2 is the target. Did you say?
1.2 is the target.
You're fully in the flow.
We're in the flow. I really enjoyed the Blue Earth Forum the other month.
Good.
I don't know if I told you that before this, but I really enjoyed it.
Good.
Really interesting. And what I've really appreciated is I really enjoy speaking to investors who aren't potentially the right fit for us, but who are willing to give really constructive feedback. And I found that the community at Blue Earth Forum were really willing to, I spoke to some people who were more Series A, Series B, but who still made the time to share their thoughts and feedback on our approach, and connect us to other people. And I think that's a really special part of a community that you don't always see. You don't always see that.
On the whole, mostly, I mean, there's not everyone's perfect out there, but on the whole, when you speak to an investor whose job it is to look at like business models and ideas and routes to market and
Mm.
growth, they have a huge amount of experience to bring. And even if, it's easy to take rejection and be like, that's just annoying. Now I don't like you anymore.
No,
Or that more often than not, you can kind of take quite a lot of good advice. Or they might have an idea of, oh, I really like this. Have you thought about this? Have you tried that? You need to speak to this person. And it might be,
mm,
like you just said, it's more of a Series A conversation. But the smartest thing you can do is to continue building the relationship. The people that have got the most out of Blue Earth are the people that have kind of consistently stuck with us. And they come back to an event, then they can kind of speak to that investor again and say, well, when I saw you
mm,
last time, we were turning over 1 million. We now do it. We hit those targets. That pipeline was true. And we're now at 2.5 million ARR, and we're growing, and we're about to land this client, this client, this client. And funnily enough, they're either interested or they start opening even more doors for you. And it just, continues to ladder up. And I have
mm.
spoken to some people that get it so wrong, and they go, well, met this investor and they were like interested, but they said no, and they said no, and they said no. So stuff them all. And you're like, oh, that's not how it works. It's just not
Why
how it
did they
works.
say why did they say no, and what can you
Yeah.
learn, and how can you evolve? Yeah,
Yeah. 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 So there
I
is, yeah.
really enjoyed Blue Earth Forum for that reason, actually.
There's a lot to learn from the no. Why no
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then you can build from there. It sounds like you're nicely on that journey. But yeah, the feedback that we had from AimHi was incredibly strong. I've seen we go through the feedback lists, and it was popping with lots of different people, angels, family offices, institutional investors, which is exactly what we want to see. And yeah, well then hopefully there'll be some good transactions that come off the back of it. And then what's next once you raise the funding? What are the key priorities for AimHi over the next sort of 6 to 12 months?
Oh, it's too exciting. It's so exciting to think about. Well, we've got our, as I mentioned, our pipeline at the moment is it's a it's an exciting time for Aim High
Yeah.
Earth go to market wise.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to being able to get really stuck in some of those really exciting opportunities that are coming up. And then we have a lot of plans to validate, particularly about how to that scale question. What would it look like if we suddenly in a month all everyone in our pipeline said, "Yep, closed, let's begin in a month." What needs to happen to get us ready for that scale? How can we set ourselves up to make the most of the demand that we're seeing?
Yeah.
And I'm really excited. I'm working. Yeah, Bella, my co-founder who I mentioned, is so excited about what that evolution journey might look like. How can we
Yeah.
continue to set and raise that standard of online training whilst making it really easy for the companies that we work with? Yeah, it gives me goosebumps thinking about what that could be like,
Brilliant.
actually.
Well, that's good. That's where you want to be. That
Yeah.
gets you jumping out of bed in the morning just to.
Yeah.
I was thinking as you were explaining that Bella's got a big task in front of her.
Oh, I think she can't wait. I think she can't
Yeah.
wait.
But brilliant. Okay. Well, I think we're coming up for time there, and it's been fascinating, kind of, digging into the story, where it came from, how the founders came together, developing the product, how you're now evolving from winning big clients, learning from them, and now looking to kind of scale up. It's an epic story there, and it really does feel like you see hockey stick graphs, and you've learned a lot, and you're on the way up. Sounds like you've got an incredibly busy pipeline. I can think of loads of people I want to introduce you to from
Oh, please do,
from,
Guy.
from the Blue Earth Network, and we'll certainly be busy on your behalf doing that both on the investor side, but there's loads of corporates that I know would really value the support, because it is such, you speak to these big companies when they have 5, 10, 20,000 plus people. Trying to get everyone on the same page at the same time is no mean feat, and it sounds like
Mm,
you've come up with a solution that can really support that. So yeah, really exciting times ahead. To wrap things up, we always like to finish on someone else,
okay.
and another business or a founder that's really inspiring at the moment. And it could be super early stage startup. It could be someone that you've always followed for a long time. It could be an enterprise client that's tackling the challenge better than anyone. Who springs to mind?
A few people have are on my mind. I think I'll go with, have you okay, they're an amazing duo, Patrick and Erica Neve from an organization called Regenerative Governance. And
Okay.
they work with organizations to rethink their kind of corporate governance structures so
Right.
that that governance serves people, planet, and purpose. And they
Fantastic.
kind of work with businesses to align their decision making with environmental stewardship and community well-being, and they're really inspired by nature and indigenous wisdom and donut economics, etc. I find them very inspiring, provocative, challenging, and
Yeah.
constantly pushing you. You know, I think a
Brilliant.
lot
Imagine they're
about,
getting into some boardrooms and, having to
yeah,
shake things up
shake things
and
up. They're
taste,
amazing.
taste the music and convince the right people. That sounds like,
Yeah,
yeah, no doubt they're in constant debate. I'm definitely keen to check them out and
definitely
see
check them out.
what they're
Really
doing.
interesting, really challenging, and constantly pushing people to ask good questions
Yeah,
about business as usual. So yeah, check them out.
brilliant. All
Regenerative
right, I'll
governance.
check that out. That's a good one. I hadn't heard of that one, so that's
Yeah.
always nice. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us on today's episode. Exciting times ahead, no doubt, for AimHi. We're looking forward to showcasing all the work that you're doing, introducing you to as many people as possible as being a big part of Blue Earth and being part of our Ventures membership. So it's brilliant to be working with you, and we've seen kind of the way people gravitate towards what you're doing already, and I think that's just the start. So congrats on everything you've built, and see you very soon at the next Blue Earth event.
Can't wait. October. Can't wait.
Yeah,
Thanks,
brilliant.
Guy.
Thanks, Sarah.